column 1, row 1, column 1, row 1, column 1, row, right? And like so on, and it becomes very, very cumbersome. So what you do there is you assign the table itself a role of presentation. And so now the screen reader won't announce the table.
But then you'll miss all the data inside the table.
No. Role presentation does not hide its children.
Does not hide what?
Does not hide the element's children. It just hides the element itself. And so the row 1 or column 1, row 1 is a component of the table that gets hidden when you add a role presentation to the parent table tag.
Well, let's hope that's a non sequitur.
But you're right, if you did that to a table, it wouldn't read the TDs properly, and so it wouldn't read the data cells properly. So if you have a data table, you don't want to use that.
Right.
So again, a good example is the all equals blank string, as opposed to all equals print. So this example, a printer image is presented adjacent to the link text print. In the good example, the link text and the image are both combined within the anchor tag. So the image's alt text is empty or null, since the link conveys the same information. In the bad example, the link text and the image are both combined within the anchor tag, but the alt text for the image is the same as the link text. So the screen reader will actually read link, print, print. As a best practice, do not use text on the alt text of an image if the text adjacent to it is the same. Another option to implement this function is to define the image as a CSS background image. In this case, only the print link will receive focus and be announced by the screen reader. And we'll talk about CSS background images a little bit later. Does that all make sense? Apparently a little bit later it is now. So, CSS background images. Information and active CSS images must have an alternative text in the HTML. Authors should avoid using information or active CSS images, but rather implement them as elements in the HTML. In special circumstances, the use of the CSS clip method or the ARIA label attribute to add alternative content to information and active CSS images that will be read by the screen reader. As we mentioned for information images and active images, the alternative text must describe the purpose of the element and be short, meaningful, and accurate. Generally speaking, if you have an image in the middle of an article, blog post, or whatever it may be, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the article whatsoever, and it's there for stylistic purposes, you can mark it or label it as a CSS background or implement it as such, and then generally speaking, the screen reader will actually read that image.
Why would you do that as opposed to just labeling like the decorative?
You could label it as a decorative image, but if you're implementing it from a design, it would be easier just to add it as a CSS background.
So it's more
image.
semantic? So it's
Yeah.
More.
Complex images must have a short alternative text that describes the main purpose of the image, but must also provide more detailed text description to the image when the short text alternative does not adequately convey the function or information provided in the image. It adds information that cannot be provided in a short alt text, and that helps non-sighted users as well as users with cognitive disabilities understand the content better. The extended description must be programmatically linked to the image element. There are several methods for providing the detailed text description for an image. Show it on the HTML page using ARIA describe by, embed it inside an expand collapse, place it on another web page and link to it from the current page using an anchor tag, refer to a long description contained on a separate resource or within the same page, specify where the description ends, invoke it as part of a pop-up from the current page. So again, using that ARIA describe by. And now this says while it's on the HTML page. So going back to your question, right? Could you have, or was it your question?
What's the
About
question?
the dictionary?
Oh, no, it's Devin.
That was
Yeah.
Devin's, right? So going back to your question about the dictionary, right? You could provide using JavaScript a dictionary or library file that gets pulled into every single page at the request of a specific profile or some option that you've allowed the end user to select. And then using the ARIA describe by, you can inject those into like the very end of the page, make them hidden, and then tie them back to those specific acronyms. Or you could add a link, or you could provide it as part of a pop-up. There are other ways to handle that.
Yeah. So the long description attribute, that is one that you add in specific cases where, I'm sorry, I didn't put quick.
So for example, like we have a client who runs an e-commerce site and provides a preview of books. You can think of it like Amazon, right? When you go to buy a book, most textbooks and other books, you can actually preview the content. And so you can start to read a little bit, almost to simulate like you're at the store and you're kind of flicking through a book
Right.
to see if you want to buy it or not. In that case where you're reading that text, if it's an image, which most of the time it is, then the short alternative text or the character length of the alternative text is not descriptive enough and won't allow you to describe the image well enough, because all of the text in an image should be available to an individual using a screen reader.
So it looks like the entire text of the page
Yes,
in this case.
exactly. And so now how do you take that entire text of a page that is an image and make it accessible to a screen reader? Well, you can do a short alternative text. It may be, in the book example, it may be the chapter, the page that you're on, and then using ARIA describe by, you can actually append to the image or put in the container that contains the image. You can put a paragraph or a span tag and then put the full text of that image, or in this case the page of the book, in that span tag, and then that becomes accessible and readable to a screen reader while it stays hidden visibly from the page. So, to continue talking about complex images, there are some advantages to having the description on the page and to using a long description. On page, obviously, all users can access the description. You're not forcing them to open a new window. You're not forcing them to skip away from whatever process or flow or task they're currently in to open up a new browser tab and to take a look at the new page. And the long description advantages, it's reusable for multiple instances of the same image, does not add on-page visual clutter to the original document, and the description's endpoint is apparent to the user. And so going back to that dictionary, for example, you may have WCAG, that acronym, listed out 100 times. And then you can embed it into a hidden span element anywhere on your page. And then you can just reference that span element over and over and over and over again. So you only have to write it once. And in your instance, where you're maintaining a dictionary and you're really dynamically loading it into the page, you really only need to maintain one master list of acronyms, and then you can put that into every page because it's invisible and it's just adding on at the bottom.
Yeah.
Does it really matter that the acronym isn't on the page? Not necessarily. Okay, so here we have a pie chart. Who doesn't love pie charts when looking at percentages and data?
Oh my god. Good stuff.
And so here we have a complex image, and it's using ARIA describe by. So in this case, the alternative text is actually first quarter sales by component, details in text following the chart. and then aria described by